the Veterinary Financial Podcast, where we discuss financial freedom and professional success. I'm Meredith Jones, a veterinarian and financial planner for vets.
And I'm David Azis. I'm also a financial planner for vets.
Today, we're answering questions from you about investing. Some of our listeners know this and some may not. I run a Facebook group called Debt Free Vets. Recently, we asked the group what questions they have about investing. So today, we're going to chat through the top 5. David, do you want to run this in like a David Letterman show style where you count down 5 to 1, or do you want to go for a classic, just like 1 through 5?
I like a good top 5 classic, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, going from 1 to 5. That's just how I like it. But also, I'll try to be the next best David Letterman. I don't know, David Azis, David Letterman. This is the birth of the next David Letterman right here on the Vet Financial Podcast. You guys heard it first. No pressure. Let's go.
Oh, gosh. All right, here we go.
Okay, I'll ask the first question, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. So, number 1, remember, these questions are all from you guys, the listeners. 1, thank you, by the way. And 2, hopefully you enjoy this. So, number 1, best ways to save for retirement if you don't have a retirement account through your employer. What do you do?
So there's a misconception out there that a lot of vets actually think, if they don't have an employer retirement plan offered through work, that they can't save for retirement. So the first thing to know is that your employer plan is not the only option. That could even help some of the folks out there that do have an employer plan. You could actually have a separate account that is just yours. If you don't have an employer plan, you can still have an IRA or a Roth IRA or a backdoor Roth IRA. IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. So that means that you are the one who owns the account. You get to choose the investments. So you can have that account even if you don't have an employer account. Now, you can't save as much money in that account as you could in a 401k or a simple IRA, for example. For this year, for 2024, you can save $7,000 per year into that type of account. So just know that you're still able to save for retirement. Okay, what if you want to save more than $7,000 and you don't have an employer plan? Can you still invest, David?
Yeah, there's a couple other options. 1, if we're still in the land of retirement account investing, because you can also invest for retirement, not in a retirement account. So I'll get to that in a second. But if you're married, for example, and your spouse has a 401k through their employer, you'd be surprised how many people are saying they run into this issue of like, oh, we can't save more for retirement because I've maxed out my Roth IRA, for example, at $7,000, and we've got another $10,000 that we want to invest in the retirement bucket. And then we come to find out that the spouse has only, quote, invested $10,000 into their 401k. And it's like, well, the limit on that's $23,000. Why don't you just increase her or his retirement account savings by the additional that you wanted to invest? Now, there's a whole other episode we could do on like, should we combine finances or not for married couples? But assuming that it's all one big net worth, it's all one goal at the end of the tunnel. If you're looking to maximize the tax buckets in retirement and you don't have an employer account and you're not already maxing out spouse's employer retirement account, well, there you go. That's the next eventual step. On top of that, what about brokerage accounts, Meredith? Like I said earlier, you don't need to, quote, invest for retirement in a retirement account, right? What's a brokerage account?
Right, exactly. So a brokerage account is a non-retirement investment account. So those of you with student loans may have heard about this already. It's the same type of account that we recommend using to save for the tax bomb that would be due at the end of income-driven repayment and after you get forgiveness. A brokerage account can also be used to save for retirement. It can also, by the way, be used to save for early retirement as well. And so if you are in that situation where your employer doesn't offer a plan, or even if you're, for example, in a practice where maybe you have a simple IRA and you wish you had a 401k so that you could contribute the full $23,000 to a retirement plan each year, you can actually save beyond that. And there's no limit to how much you can put into a brokerage account and invest.
Cool.
Okay, that brings us to number 2. So, David, how on earth do you save and invest for the tax bomb?
Great question for everyone listening out there. Well, first, let's define exactly what the tax bomb is, okay? Because some of you might not know. I don't know if we made up the term. I don't know if Student Loan Planner made up the term, but here's what we're referring to when we say tax bomb, okay? The tax bomb is when you're going for loan forgiveness for your federal student loans. They say that at the end of that forgiveness tunnel, when the loans get forgiven, whether it's 20 years from now, 25 years from now, or you've already got 15 years of credit towards forgiveness and therefore you've got 5 years left, let's say. Okay. At the end of the timeline, when the loans go away, in that year, whatever you get forgiven is supposed to be, quote, treated as taxable income. And so what that means is whatever you get forgiven is going to go on your tax return. They're going to pretend you made that much more in income that you actually did. And so let's say you're a veterinarian with 300 grand of student loans and you get that forgiven X amount of years from now. They're going to pretend, they say, that you made an extra $300,000 in income that you didn't, and you're going to get taxed on it. And so depending on what state you're in, depending on what income tax rates are in the future, who knows? But if you made $0 in real income and you got 300 grand of loans forgiven, you might owe 100 grand lump sum to the government at the end of forgiveness. Yikes. And then, hey, if you didn't make zero because you're a practicing veterinarian, now you might be in a higher marginal tax bracket. You might owe 120, 140,000 lump sum at the end of forgiveness. This isn't to talk about exact numbers. This is just to say that is what the tax bomb is. And as part of a lot of veterinarians' full financial plan is they know, based off of their own student loan plan, what is that potential tax bomb and how do I save and invest? Investing is the key. How do I best save and invest along the way to make that a no big deal at the end of the tunnel? So that's what it is. Now, to actually answer the question, how should I go about doing it? What are some best practices for saving for the tax bomb? The go-to type of account, at least for most people, is going to be that brokerage account, that after-tax brokerage account that is not a, quote, retirement account, that has no age restrictions on it, so that way you can access the money when you need it penalty-free. So that's the type of account that for most people it makes sense to prioritize. Now, how much and what it should be invested in, that is a big it depends. And what you guys should be thinking about is, when do I need the money? Is the tax bomb going to happen for me 15 years from now? Is it going to happen 8 years from now? Is it going to happen 24 years from now? It just depends. And the longer time horizon that you have, the more aggressive you can be in your investment choices. The shorter time horizon you have, and aggressive meaning like, oh, maybe it's an investment choice that has a higher return on it, but will fluctuate in value more, risk reward. If you have a 20-year timeline, you can stomach more risk and more fluctuation along the way than someone who needs the money a year from now. So that's the big thing, is when do you need the money will dictate your exact investment strategy and how much, because of how compounding interest works. $1 today might be worth $40 20 years from now. But $1, don't quote me on that. Go look up the calculator yourself. But $1 today, 3 years from now, might be worth $1.30, right? So the earlier you start preparing for the tax bomb, technically, the less amount you need to invest for it. Everybody's going to be different, but those are the things to consider. How aggressive of an investment choice should it be based off of when do I need the money? And also based off of when do I need the money is how much you should be in investing. But that's how to do it. And those are the considerations, usually in a taxable brokerage account, and just consider when do you need the money. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the other thing that I'll add to that is in diversified investments, meaning, certainly you wouldn't want to put it all in one stock, it's going to need to be in different funds, and preferably, maybe we've got some US, some international, some large cap, large company, some small cap, small company, for example. So that's just a very broad overview to say diversified funds, diversified investments. Follow-up question to that, David. So why wouldn't I just put my tax bomb into a high yield savings account?
Ooh, this is another spicy question. High yield savings accounts for the last couple years, and including now still, have been paying pretty well. 4, 5, sometimes even above 5%. Now it's tough to find one above 5%, at least as of the date of this recording. So let's say most of them are paying between 4 and 5% right now. So yeah, you might be tempted because of that guaranteed rate of return to just invest all of your tax bond funds in the high yield savings account. The problem with that is, what if you're, again, planning for a tax bomb 15 years from now? If the Federal Reserve continues to lower their benchmark interest rate, what immediately follows are things like high yield savings accounts. On my high yield savings account, when the Federal Reserve cut their benchmark rate by a 0.5%, like the next day, my high yield savings account went down 0.5%, which is fine. It's the high yield savings account's a great place for something like an emergency fund, but for something that is 10, 15, 20 years in the future, a tax one that could be a longer term goal, high yield savings accounts might pay 1% next year. Who knows, right? And the Federal Reserve has been pretty clear what direction they're going in. So, because of that, you shouldn't look at a high yield savings account as a long term investment vehicle because, one, already 4.5%, you should be able to make more than that yield on a 10 plus year investment anyway. But also, it's not 4.5% forever. It is 4.5% for now and could very easily change within the next 3 to 12 months again. The other reason is taxes, too. So, this is going to be a little bit nerdy. But when you get paid the interest on your high yield savings account, it counts as taxable income for you. So, it actually technically slightly increases your future student loan payment when you get that interest. Cool. But I mean, well, actually not cool, but one way to avoid that tax drag. So, one, because you get taxed on it and you have to pay a higher IDR payment in the future because of it, that 4.5% yield after tax is really closer to like a 3%, depending on your particular marginal tax bracket. Okay, cool. So, there's that. But then also, you have tax drag along the way. If you invest in types of assets that don't pay tons of dividends or not just like interest like a high yield savings account, you won't be taxed so heavily on it along the way as the money grows. And so high yield savings accounts are awesome if you need to keep cash. That's a great place to do it. But again, because of the lack of tax benefits and because of the yield might go to zero next year, who knows? Is it a way to grow your money to help you for that tax bomb? Long run, probably not. Now, the flip side of that, real quick, would be, what if the tax bomb for you is 2 years from now? All right, maybe we're doing a little bit more nuanced of a strategy. Maybe we are saving some additional cash for that. But again, for the typical person with a 10 plus year time horizon for this tax bomb, would I invest in the high yield savings account for it? No, it's not an investment. And my cat, who just walked across the stream, agrees. Let's see here. Drum roll, please, for number 3. I don't know if you guys could hear that. Sorry, I'm distracted by my cat in the lab. Best part about doing a vet financial podcast is my cat will probably be mentioned every single time. So, number 3, guidelines for deciding pretax versus Roth. Ooh. So here's a spicy one that you might hear many different opinions. Meredith, specifically for like 401ks, because I know a lot of people have that option too. Like, when should someone generally think about prioritizing Roth dollars versus pre-tax dollars? What do you think?
Yeah, so a big one that we talk to clients about when they have student loans is, okay, if you have student loans and you are on an income driven repayment plan and you're going for forgiveness, Every dollar that you put into that 401k that is pre-tax is going to reduce your adjusted gross income, and therefore it's going to reduce your future student loan payments. And so for a lot of folks who have student loans, we're talking about contributing that entire amount that you're contributing to your 401k on the pre-tax side, just so that we can keep those student loan payments down as low as possible and get as much benefit as we can out of income driven repayment and forgiveness. Now, if you don't have student loans, or if your spouse doesn't have student loans, and that could even, if one of you has student loans and the other one doesn't, that could even get, I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. That may or may not matter if one of you has student loans and the other one doesn't. But let's just say you as a single individual or you as a couple, nobody has student loans. Well, then we go back to more of the classic explanation of, okay, would you rather have more dollars now? So then maybe you're contributing more on the pre-tax side, and then you're paying taxes in retirement on that money that's going into the 401k. Or would you rather go ahead and pay taxes now and have some of that money go into the Roth side so that when you retire, you don't have to pay taxes on that money? So a lot of our clients who have a lot of student loans, because certainly a lot of vets have a lot of student loans, and they're going for income driven repayment, a lot of times we're talking about contributing to that 401k just on the pre-tax side. And then if you want to still have some Roth dollars, you can still do that by using a Roth IRA or backdoor Roth IRA.
It's just what order do you prioritize it? I think the last thing I'll add, because I always think I find it fascinating, is technically student loan borrowers going for forgiveness are in a higher tax bracket than everybody else. Because think about it. For all the vets out there who are on an IDR plan, whether or not SAVE sticks around or not, that's a whole other can of worms. But the best plans, the way they work is 10% of that next dollar that goes on your tax return the following year goes into your student loan payment calculation. So you make an extra $1,000 on paper, that increases your future student loan payment by about $100 more than it otherwise would. It's an income tax, basically. And so for most veterinarians, again, it depends on what state you're in, but like if you're in California, for example, a lot of vets are in this with pursuing forgiveness on an IDR plan, are in like a 40 to 50% marginal tax bracket. And if you do retirement planning right, you might or you should not have student loans by the time you retire. And so that 10% hit should go away. And so because of that, I think a lot of the time it does make sense to prioritize for veterinarians the pre-tax bucket first. But again, it always depends. Meredith, do you have anything to add to that? Want to fight me on that? Did I say anything wrong? I don't know. It's a pretty hotly contested issue, I think, pre-tax versus Roth.
All right, and that brings us to number 4. How much of your retirement do you really need in bonds if you're not close to retirement?
Oh gosh. So just to set the stage, bonds, super safe. Guaranteed rate of return if you hold the bond through the duration. Because bonds have different periods of time on them. You can have a 10-year bond, you have a 1-year, what's called note, or there's notes, there's bills. You have a 1-year bill, right? But bonds in general, super safe. You hold it to what's called maturity and you get paid X amount. Not like a stock that who knows if it's going to go up or if it's going to go down. Bonds can fluctuate in value, but you only care about that if you didn't hold it through the end of the contract date. Okay, so the question is, do you need bonds if not close to retirement? Depends on what not close to retirement means. Is not close to retirement 5 years from now? A lot of people think 5 years is a long time. Is not close to retirement, hey, I'm not going to retire for another 30 years. So what I would say is if you are planning on retiring, for example, age 65, and you are 40 or you are 30 and you've got 20 plus years, unless you are super mega ultra risk averse, I don't think there's really a ton of need to hold bonds in your portfolio, because you don't care if the market fluctuates over the next year or two. You're not needing the money anyway. You would just buy more investments and get excited if the market goes down, actually, because now everything's on sale. So if you, the longer time horizon, let's just say rule of thumb 10 plus years, I'd be hard pressed to argue that you need a lot, if any, bonds. Now, it always depends. If you're 5 years away from retirement, probably. If you've been investing already for 20 years, maybe you still don't have another 10 years until you want to retire. But also, this is why it just always depends. If you are in the wealth preservation mode, meaning you already won the game, you've built a portfolio that is large enough where it is already at, or for sure going to be at, a place that allows you to retire the way you want. Well, maybe even though we might still have over 5 years left, or maybe 10 years left until you retire, maybe it makes sense to try to preserve the wealth more than grow it aggressively. Because if you already won the game, see what I'm saying? So again, it just depends on, going back to that, when do you need the money? What is it for? But also for this question, it's how much you already have and how much do you need? Because even if we still got quite a bit of time left, if we've already won the game, well, we don't need to take as much risk. We might as well focus on preserving wealth, in which case, maybe for that person who still has a decent amount of time left, you have some bonds. So it always depends, but you can get really into the weeds on the bond stuff.
Yeah, a few things to add. And I mean, this question is definitely one of those classic financial "it depends" type of
Yeah.
type of questions, because it depends on how old are you, how close to retirement are you, what's your risk tolerance. There are so many things. The other thing that I'll say that might be a counterpoint to what you said earlier, David, is bonds have always traditionally they've been considered to be really safe, but then I think there's an argument that comes into play of, if bonds are not keeping pace with inflation, then are they really safe? And so that's just another thing to just introduce into the conversation. I don't have the answer to that, but it's just another thought. A lot of people, when they are choosing their funds to invest in for the 401k, a lot of people are choosing target date funds. And so target date funds are, from a classic sense, they're based on your age. And they say, for example, okay, maybe you're going to retire in 2055. And so we're going to put you in these funds up until around age 40. And there are resources on this. Typically up until at least around age 40, those are going to be slated to be about 90% stocks and up to 10% bonds. And so that gives you an idea of earlier in life, and this is Vanguard, Fidelity, et cetera, they're kind of tracking people into a lot more stocks versus bonds in early career. And then later, as time goes on, they move those funds into where we have more bonds than we did before and less stocks than we did before. So that's another thought process there. And then the other thing to just mention is, even when you retire, there could potentially, and this is all, of course, this is an it depends as well, but so it all depends on what your overall portfolio looks like, what your assets are, et cetera. But you could even argue, okay, well, if you retire, let's say somebody retires at 60, they could live another 30 years.
That is very true. Thanks for pointing out. Yeah, a lot of retirement portfolios still are, they're not just, it's not like you're 100% bonds the second you reach retirement age at 60, 65, whatever your retirement age is. Because unless you're planning on immediately dying, if you have to plan for a 30-year retirement, even on day one of being 100% retired, you've got still 30-year investment dollars in there. They're not all for 30-year, but some of them are. I think a lot of retirement portfolios are actually less bond heavy than a lot of people think, because you're not depleting the entire portfolio day one of retirement. You've got 10 plus year money, 20 plus year money still in that. And so should that be in bonds? A lot of it shouldn't. It just depends though. So really good point. So I've got a spicy one to end this. And I say spicy because, if you're tired of hearing us say it depends, well, I guess I'm sorry. but it is a great question. Number 5 of top questions that you guys asked for this round. After I max out my 401k and backdoor Roth IRA. Where do I put my money next? What do you think?
Okay, very good question. First thing I'm going to say is that not everybody is going to max out their 401k and max out their backdoor Roth IRA, and that's okay. You can still retire without maxing out both of those accounts. People do that every day. So don't feel like if you're not maxing out both that there's no judgment, there's no failure there. Now, as your income increases, you're going to be more likely to want to max out both of those. And if you are wanting to retire early, you may be looking for, okay, if I'm maxing out both of those accounts already, where might I be putting money next? Especially because most people are not, and then there's penalties to think about and that sort of thing. If you're taking money out of your retirement accounts before age 59 and a half, right? We at least have to, 401k, we always have to think about that. With the backdoor Roth IRA, we often have to think about that. So let's say you've maxed out both of those. You're looking for, where is my next bucket where I'm going to put money? Then you're probably looking at, we've talked about it on this episode already, a brokerage account. So a non-retirement investment account as another bucket to either save for retirement, early retirement, or long-term financial goals. That's the next. Now, any other thoughts there, David?
Yeah, I guess the it depends part too on this is, well, after maxing out the 401k and a backdoor Roth IRA, what's your next money goal? Do we want to get into real estate, whether that's buying your first home or getting into rental real estate? If you do want to get into real estate, when do you plan on doing it? If it's because I've been maxing out 401k and backdoor Roth IRA for multiple years, like I'm so good at investing, but I always wanted to buy a home, but I've never felt comfortable until now. Like, you might be ready to buy a home in the next 3 years, which I would consider near term, in which case, yeah, the next best place to invest long term might be that brokerage account. But if you need the money in less than 3 years for something like a down payment, honestly, especially still while cash is paying 4.5%, if it's near term money for some big money goal, probably just cash in a high yield savings account could be a great option for that. It just depends on but what if you don't want to buy any real estate? You know your car is going to break down in 2 years, but you've already got the cash for that plus your emergency fund. Great. If you have 5+ year goals, 10+ year goals that are outside of retirement, and you've already maxed out those retirement buckets, then I think the brokerage account is the natural next step. But again, you have to balance that with what are your other, whether it's real estate, life, saving for kids' college, saving for kids' school, whatever it is. Like, you have to balance that with when you need the money. So brokerage account, I think, can be great, but just keep the real estate, because I'm the real estate guy. Keep the real estate bug in me is just like, hang on, pause the brokerage. If you need the money in a year from now for that down payment, probably just do it in cash. I know that's not sexy, but like, come on.
Yep.
I'd hate for you to lose 20% of your investment the day that you need it to buy that house because you're saving for like the next 6 months, and then the market happens to be bad 6 months from now. Totally could happen.
Yeah, and it's all about, okay, what's your next goal? Like you said, is it a short-term goal, a medium-term goal, or a long-term goal? And if it's a longer-term goal, then you're going to be more likely to invest the money than if it is a shorter-term goal. And of course, I wanted to let you bring up real estate, David, since you're the real estate guy.
Oh, thank you.
The other thing, our chief compliance officer is Sim. She would say we were remiss if we did not bring up the health savings account as well.
Oh yeah, I always forget about those. They're awesome. I'll tell you why I forget about them. But, yeah, sorry, keep on going.
So health savings account. So that is another, and by the way, this is also a pre-tax account. So anything you contribute to a health savings account is going to reduce your adjusted gross income. And therefore it's going to reduce your student loan payment if you are on an income driven plan. So that's another thing as well. And that is money that can roll over from one year to another. A lot of people think about FSAs. Those are flexible savings accounts. And so those the money does not roll over, but with the health savings account, it does roll over year to year. And if you don't need it right now because you don't have a lot of healthcare expenses right now, that's totally fine. It can actually function as another retirement bucket. It can be used in the future for Medicare expenses. And so those of you out there who have parents who are retired may be familiar with Medicare expenses are not cheap. And so it's something that you would have as an additional savings bucket in the future. Now, not everybody is eligible for a health savings account. So you have to have a high deductible health plan. So you have to have that type of medical insurance. That's not something that everybody has access to. It's not something that honestly is going to work best for everybody. So if you have a lot of healthcare expenses year to year, you may not want to be on that type of plan. You might just want to be on regular health insurance. But that is another bucket where you could put that savings if you did max out those other two accounts.
That's why I forgot about it, is because you have to have the quote high deductible plan, and that's usually defined by the plan itself. So it's not like we can give you a dollar amount of like, oh, if your deductible is this, you're good to go. You got to check
Right.
the plan.
All right. That gives a good overview. So if you max out your 401k and your backdoor Roth IRA, then you're probably looking at things like brokerage account, real estate, health savings account. So if you're figuring out what your next steps are financially, of course, we would love to help. What if you could get fiduciary, veterinarian specific financial planning that's student loan aware that could change your life for a price much better than you ever dreamed possible? If that sounds good to you, go to slpwealth.com/vet for a free 15-minute intro call to see if we could be a good fit for you. And until next time, take care and continue your path to financial success. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered individualized financial advice.
If a specific investment is mentioned, it should not be considered a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the investment.
All investments involve risk.
Past performance does not guarantee future results. You are encouraged to seek the advice of a financial professional before implementing any investment strategies discussed.
Yay, compliance.